Hello again and welcome to another edition of Organ Showcase. Now this week I'm speaking to you from Blackpool, as the whole of my programme is dedicated to the man whose name is automatically linked with this seaside holiday town. A man who's not only a living legend in the organ world, but is in fact known to millions of people as Mr. Blackpool. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Reginald Dixon.
Thank you very much, Eric. It's very nice to have you here.
I've always thought that a man who can sell tickets is a star. But you went well beyond this. I remember being in the Tower Ballroom at Blackpool on a hot sunny bank holiday Monday. And I saw you able to draw the working man and his family away from the beach and into the Tower Ballroom to listen to you play the organ. Surely this must make you a superstar to be able to do a thing like that.
Well, yes, I suppose, of course, I've never looked at it that way. We've had some wonderful bank holidays. Often the place wasn't, I wouldn't say it was packed full, but we needed a wet day to bring extra people in. But we've had some wonderful times on those bank holidays, even on a sunny day. Yes, yes.
But I've also been in the Tower Ballroom when a top-flight band has been playing for dancing, and although it's attracted people on the floor, immediately the MC has announced the dance floor was absolutely crowded. You couldn't get a pinpoint on. Now, how do you answer that one?
Well, I made a special study of playing for dancing because I'm sure it is a special study, particularly playing on a pipe organ where you have, as you know as well as anyone else, you get a certain time lag when you're playing. When I first went to Blackpool, I was classical minded. I still like classical music, but as you know, I like all kinds of music. I love playing marches, I love playing dance music, and I did study it specially because when I first went for my interview, they asked me what I'd done, and I said, well, I was in the RCM when I was 17 for piano teaching. I went to Sheffield University and studied for counterpoint, harmony counterpoint, and I intend to be going for the must-back, Bachelor of Music. But now I'm here. He said, well, what can you do from a dance point of view? I said, well, I played for dancing. As a matter of fact, I'd only played for one dance, and it was the Cutler's Hall in Sheffield, and I was sent home halfway through the night as hopeless. So I realised I'd have to really get down to it, and I never forget the first night. And the first tune I played, and I think I've played it and announced it since, was Happy Days Are Here Again. And I played it as a quick step. And the pianist in the band said to me, what was that supposed to be? I said, it was a quick step. He says, you're telling me. He said, do you see them running around the floor? And they must have been, but I hadn't much experience. But for the first, it was winter time, you see, and I was able to get down to rehearsing and getting the correct tempos with the aid of a metronome. And then I found I began to enjoy playing this dance music and the marches and the light music, because when all's done and said, people that come to Blackpool, and I think most people that go to these holiday resorts, but particularly Blackpool, they like to be entertained, and I was told that was what I was there for. Forget all about ARCMs and so on and so on. They didn't want to know about that at all. And they'd had two organists there before me, and the organ wasn't very, very popular. And the final thing was, well, if you don't make a success of it, you go, and the so-and-so organ goes as well. And that's how I started.
that's the style that everybody remembers you by, Reg, and there's no doubt about it, it is an original style. How did you develop this?
I've no idea. It just came. It's I notice, and you've probably noticed, there's always a lot of left hand in it. Well, I am very left-handed.
I would say that you had the best left hand in the business.
I think that is the secret of it. Of course, I'm very ambidextrous, you know. I'm not a very clever do-it-yourself type of man, but around the house, if my wife says there's a screw come out of there or there's a nail wants knocking in there, I can use either hand. Or on the odd occasion when I cut the bread, which I do, and being domesticated, I can cut with either hand, but I'm very, very left-handed. It's
and it's paid off on the keyboard.
I think that is the secret of it, I'm sure. And of course, as I said before, I work very hard on the piano, and even now, although it's over 3 years since I left Blackpool, there's hardly a day passes without that I play the piano, and that, of course, keeps my fingers strong and keeps them supple. And I do scale practice now, and I do all my rehearsing on the piano. People say, why don't you have an organ? Well, I do occasionally have an organ at home, but I don't want to part with my piano that I have here, which you see this rather nice grand, which I struggled to buy when I first went to Blackpool. I still got it now. But I do a lot of work on that, and I think that's what keeps my fingers supple, and I think it's the left hand that really has helped me with this. That's all I can think. I have no idea.
I would say that your style has really made you as popular as you are, rather than the fact that you were at Blackpool.
Well, it's nice of you to say that, but I always feel that Blackpool is a marvellous show place, and whatever ability one has, unless it can be brought forward by some means or other, and I regard Blackpool as that means, and I always will, it can't come out. It's got to be... There must be many young organists, young musicians who are hidden behind... I should say not behind a bushel, but they're hidden, aren't they? And they don't come to light because... And I was fortunate in that respect that I went to Blackpool, so I will always say that part of my success, a big part of my success, has been Blackpool.
Yes, but you've already told us that 2 organists were employed before you.
Yes, that's perfectly true.
And probably 2 competent players.
Oh, yes.
But
absolutely.
without the style.
Yes.
And I'm sure in my own little mind that style is the thing that sets you at the pinnacle of your fame because of this holiday sound coupled with a strong rhythmic style of playing, making it possible to dance to what is really a clumsy instrument, the theatre organ.
Yes, it's something I'm very fortunate, and please, I'm not being foolish when I say that. I mean exactly, because I have no idea how I do it, but I enjoy doing it, and always have. Because people have said to me, "You look as if you're enjoying it." I said, "When I feel I'm playing well to myself, then I am enjoying it."
One thing I would like to ask you, and obviously many fans must be thinking of this, how did you come to start this what I call doubling up? I don't know what you call it. You'd play the xylophone and sort of double up in the chording, which would give it a sort of a barrel organ effect.
Yes.
Which came over very, very effectively.
You don't mean the second touch, do you? Not the
No.
double touch, yeah.
Da-da-da-da-da-da-da.
Yes. Well, often it's by going to the other manual. There are 1 or 2 organists I've seen doing it.
But I would say you started it.
Yes. You see, at that time, I'd only 2 manuals, and I found that there wasn't sufficient room to move on the 1 manual. So I thought, in order to bring out more accentuation, by going up to the louder manual, I was able to get that rhythm more distinct. Because as you know, on the type of organ we were using, you've played that one in Newcastle all those years ago. The right hand, and putting this simply, the right hand was always louder than the left hand. So therefore, by going with my left hand up to the loud one, it would give an accented rhythm as well.
I'd like to demonstrate this style by playing another oldie of yours, Canadian Capers.
That's it.
A lot of people must have thought that in the winter season you hibernated, but in actual fact, I know that you many times went down to London and toured all the suburbs of London and probably even into the West End, as far as I know.
Yes, I toured the Granada cinemas one period before the war, and then I did some of the other theatres too. Astoria, the Brixton Astoria, the Old Kent Road Astoria. And there are some places which I've forgotten, but people keep reminding me, oh, I saw you in that cinema, I saw you at that cinema. But mostly my touring days before the war, in the winter time, I used to leave home in October and very often get back at Christmas and then go away again after Christmas.
I also remember you touring the Moss Empire variety theatres in this country.
Ah, yes.
Along with stars like Frank Randall.
Yes, in great days.
Josie Flock.
Yes. There was Vera Lynn too. I think I was with Vera when in Sunderland when we had that awful accident with the relay part of it. The innards, actually, the working part of the organ was toppled over accidentally as they set the stage, and that's when I had to play the piano the whole of the week. And the press kept saying, well, of course the organ will be ready for Saturday. Well, it wasn't ready for Saturday, and I went on for the first time amidst quite a considerable amount of booze from the I don't mean booze drink, I mean booze, real booze, and it was a very unfortunate experience, that. But we got it right. It's quite a wonderful tour with this. We got stuck in the snow from Grimsby to Scunthorpe when I did the number 2 dates, and it was quite an experience to tour with this organ. In some places we arrived, but they'd only got DC. I don't realise that AC wasn't generally used, and we had to get converters very often. I don't know whether you ever tried to play an organ, and it sounds all right, but you're a major third below. You play the chord of C, for instance, open key of C, and you're playing A flat, and that's what happened to me on one night at West Hartlepool, a quarter of an hour before the show was due to open. And we had to send out for another converter.
But you've also played on the continent, I understand.
Yes, I've been over to Holland about 4 or 5 times.
Now, the organ in Holland is very popular, isn't it?
Yes. Yes, I think there's a leaning now towards the electronic, like in this country, but there are still a lot of faithful fans. I've one fellow who's a retired railway man. He's been writing me for 35 years now, and even on my birthday, last October, there was a tape, a cassette came along, and it was in a English-speaking Dutchman with their typical way of speaking, which is rather fascinating, I think, a dedication to me, which I found rather touching. He spoke to me first and then played some of my old records, like you're putting on today, and then he played his little home organ, electronic organ, on the other side, and he was trying to imitate what I do. I took it as a great compliment, and he said the organ I use is not so big as the one you have in Blackpool. So yes, it was very, very. I thought it was rather touching, that, and the Dutch people are very loyal too. I still sell quite a number of records over there.
Well, I think at this stage, Reg, it would be very nice to hear you now on an electronic organ.
Ah, which one is that one?
Well, you've got 2 to select from. You've got the very famous American instrument, the Rodgers,
yes,
very expensive Rolls-Royce type of instrument, or you've got this Dutch organ, which you can perhaps tell me more about.
Yes, well, that was made in Holland at the EMI studios at Hampstead. I'd been on the organ, it's the Standard Compton organ at the Avro studios, and Bob Barrett, my recording manager, said they'd like you to make a recording for the continent. As you know, Corstein did a lot of wonderful records on that
yes.
organ. It was built by a Dutchman, and he built it entirely himself. The day before I went to play this electronic organ, the head of the Avro Studios said to me, I understand, Mr. Dixon, that you are to record on the magic organ, that's what they call it. I said, yes, I'm going over and start to rehearse tomorrow, maybe the next day, and then start to record in 2 days' time. He said, you are a very brave man. I said, why? He said, well, there are no names on the stops on that organ. You have to go by colours. I said, fortunately, I'm not colourblind, but I don't know how I should go on. Anyhow, fortunately, the man who made the organ, built the organ, a man by the name of Kaiserwald, brilliant young fellow. He'd been making it for 12 years. It took him 12 years to make it, and he kept adding to it, probably with the aid of Corstein before Corstein's death. And it was really a magnificent instrument. It was 3-manual, and suddenly he said to me, I was recording, I said, I don't quite like that. I want something, I want some... he said, you want more striker. Why is that striker? Oh, I said, you mean strings? He said, yeah, more strings. He couldn't speak, he speak very little English. And I found the Dutch language very, very difficult indeed. Anyhow, by his help, I was able to make that record, but it was quite a strenuous 2 days.
Well, there was that gap in your career, Reg, when you were actually in the Royal Air Force. Could you tell us something about those years? Because some people had a miserable time. I had a wonderful time. I was in a concert party. How did you fare?
Oh, very nice. Well, part of my life was quite miserable during the early part of the war. I tried to join up. I was playing a week at the Granada Slough, and I got permission from Bernstein to go and volunteer at Northampton so that I'd be away from Blackpool. I didn't want to do my square bashing on Blackpool Promenade. So, you know, as we called it, square bashing, wasn't it?
It would have been a big draw for Blackpool,
yes,
wouldn't it?
But anyhow, I didn't put my name down. I put R.H. Dixon, which were my initials. And I thought I was getting away with it to go to Gloucester as a radio operator. I knew nothing about radio operating, but I thought I could soon learn. Anyhow, before I got time to report, they discovered me and sent me to Uxbridge as a musician. So at that time, they were forming 5-piece bands, and we formed a five-piece band. To make a long story short, eventually went to Northolt, which was not far away. And, of course, we had some wonderful times there. But at the same time, I wasn't happy because I wasn't playing the right instrument. I was playing a piano then. I got my own little band there. They were good fellows. But when you can imagine that you're playing till a place called Heston, which was near Norfolk, till 3 o'clock in the morning, then have to thumb lift back on with drums and double basses, because there was no petrol allowed for entertainments. and were thumbing lifts on the Western Avenue at 3 o'clock in the morning, having played to inebriated officers. So eventually I went in for a commission in self-defence as much as anything. I thought, well, I might have become an inebriated officer myself, but I never was, fortunately. And I was on all the D-Day exercises and in movements, and I found that very interesting. But at the same time, when I was in the ranks as a musician, I was able to make 1 or 2 records. One of them was the Tchaikovsky, which has been on one of my other records. And also, I've just recently brought out another record, made another record on the BBC organ, which recalls some of those memories of the Norfolk days.
Reg, a lot of your fans and a lot of listeners will probably think that there have been 3 different organs in the Tower Ballroom. This isn't true, is it?
No, not really. There were actually 2, but of course after the fire in 1956, there was another console. The framework of the console was kept, which was of course being very solid wood, was not destroyed, but the complete console itself, inside the contents of the console, the stops and the keys, the keys were all stuck together. They were burnt, and the tablets, like the stops we call the tablets, they were twisted out of recognition. I never forget that day when I arrived back I was in the Lake District when it happened, and I got a little standard car, a small car, which I rather enjoyed running around the Lake District in, but it wouldn't go fast enough to get me back to the tower that day. And when I arrived there, I was standing on the stage and looking down into what is the Starlight Bar, and it used to be the old restaurant. It was just one big smoking mass of twisted metal and everything. It was dreadful, and the organ was still, the organ pipes were still up in the loft, as I said, in 72-foot level, and they automatically, as you know, on the world, the shutters close as soon as you switch the wind off, and of course the thickness of the swell shutters did save the pipes, but some of them were rather damaged afterwards from the heat, which we didn't realise until later, but of course that was remedied later. But there have only been 2 organs. The first one was put in about 1928, and then it was transferred up to the Winter Gardens around about 34, 35, and the new one put in the tower. And of course when it was taken up to the Winter Gardens, it was enlarged practically at the same time, the same size as the tower organ. Now, of course, as you know, now the BBC have that organ. It's now the BBC Theatre organ at the Playhouse, Manchester.
And you still broadcast.
And I still broadcast, so it's my old love back again, you see.
You must have had many funny experiences and to relate, and many anecdotes that you could tell us. Can you tell us something really that's interesting enough for all the listeners to have a good laugh at?
Well, there are several little things which stand out, but sometimes you forget some of these things. When I used to broadcast in the winter time, we'd only one engineer. In fact, I had one engineer who was there all for most of my broadcast. And at that time, we had a lot of mice got in the place, many years ago this now, and so somebody decided to introduce a cat. And then, of course, they've been before long with many cats. And one night before a broadcast, 5 minutes before, the engineer was chasing the one cat, calling his lady love from the other side of the empty ballroom to the other. And as fast as he went to one side of the ballroom, the cat set up at another side. And this would have been picked up by the microphones, you can well imagine. Fortunately, what happened, whether he chased them out of the ballroom, I don't know, but we were able to get through. Once the organ started, it was all right. But one of the funniest things, I thought, was... you've mentioned the Tower Ballroom, the crowds that we used to get. It was one wet Sunday afternoon during the season, and the place was a seething mass of people. And I was told about a woman with a child in her arms, gradually working her way through to the front of the crowd, standing in the front in the side of the ballroom. And she apparently looked up at me, and then said to the children, "Oh, come on, it's only a bloke playing an organ," and fought her way back again through the crowd. And then there was another instance of a charming old lady, I was told, called about 8 o'clock in the morning, asking what time I was performing. So she was told I would be on that day about 3:30. It was a nice day, there'd be no morning dancing. Morning dancing was only, if wet, in those days. So she said, 3:30, oh, he's playing at 3:30, is he? Yes. Oh, and tell me, what time do they feed the animals? You know, they're the animals in the zoo. She said, oh, they're fed at 3:30, madam. She said, well, that's very bad arranging, isn't it? Both performing at the same time.
During your career, Reg, did you ever get over to the United States of America?
No, I've never been over there. I've had invitations to go to Australia and New Zealand. Well, by the time I was able to go, you see, I've had the BBC commitments, as you know, and recordings, and somehow I feel that it would break up all my routine. And now I feel that I know some organists go at. My friend Reggie Fort, he travels around a lot. But personally, I feel quite happy and quite content to stay in England now. And if they want my records, which they do, I have been president for a number of years, or patron. I'm patron of the New Zealand Theatre Organ Society. I was president of the Australian one, New South Wales division, for a long time. But I left that. I didn't go over there. I know the British organists have gone, but don't misunderstand. I just feel happy in England, and I feel now, at my time in life, I don't want to dash around any more than is necessary.